The Rossi has flown its last mission on Prime Video's sci-fi hit The Expanse. Does Marco recapture Medina Station, or do Holden and the crew find a way to thwart him? Let's explore what happened in the final episode of The Expanse, Babylon's Ashes. In the previous episode of The Expanse, Proud Belter Kamina Drummer agrees to join forces with UNN Secretary General Christian Avasarala and the Inner Planets. While Drummer is no friend to the Earthers, she also isn't an ally of Marco. So when Naomi Nagata shows up to convince her to speak to Avasarala, Drummer agrees, begrudgingly acknowledging that Marco now poses a bigger threat than the Inners she despises. At the beginning of Babylon's Ashes, Drummer meets with a coalition from Earth and Mars, which also includes James Holden and Bobbie Draper, representing the Rossi. Marco's Free Navy is flying toward Medina Station inside the ring, and the Alliance needs to stop him before he reaches the ring gate. If he makes it there, he'll be able to hide behind the railguns that were mounted on Medina.
In control of our colonies and 1,000 systems, dictating the fate of our species for a generation.
The Free Navy is split into 3 battle groups, and the UNN and Martians plan to go after the groups with the biggest warships. Drummer and her ragtag Belter fleet are assigned to attack the smaller group, which consists mostly of cargo ships. Meanwhile, the Rossi and a strike team led by Bobbie plan to take control of the railguns at Medina Station so they can turn them on Marco if he gets past the Inner's forces. UNN Secretary General Avasarala hardly believes that the plan will work.
You're such a optimist. It's a miracle you've lived this long.
The UNN battle group is heading toward the Free Navy when Avasarala is informed that the intelligence obtained by the Rossi has revealed the location of Marco's ship, the Pella. Drummer hears the news that the UNN fleet is planning to engage the Pella over her radio and looks stoic as she turns her attention to the battle group her fleet is targeting.
The frigate is the main threat. If we kill it first, we can make the rest surrender or run.
UNN-1 hits the Pella with their torpedoes and then falls back. But Avasarala notices the Pella doesn't return fire, and the other Free Navy ships aren't falling back to protect it, which indicates Marco isn't on the ship. They are understandably baffled by this development. At the same time, Drummer's fleet engages the freighter and the Free Navy battle group they're fighting. As her fleet fires, the freighter's cargo drops away, revealing the Pella. Marco fires on Drummer and a fierce gun battle follows. The action briefly knocks Drummer out, and she awakens to find a large hole in the side of her ship. She's informed that her torpedoes are gone, 2 of her fleet's ships are lost, and the Pella is heading back toward them. Drummer instructs her fleet to disengage and prepares to drive her ship into the Pella in a last-ditch effort to stop it. She is not at all afraid to sacrifice herself for the cause.
Leave the Pella to me.
However, her ally Walker beats her to it. The impact and its aftermath severely damages the Pella, and Marco's advisor Rosenfeld perishes. In the aftermath of the battle, Drummer disengages, recognizing that there's nothing else she can do. She will have to wait for the crew of the Rossi to carry through with their portion of the plan. As the Rossi burns toward Medina Station, the members of the strike force are ejected from Giambattista, an ice hauler. The Rossi is hit, and Clarissa Mao goes to fix the damage, but is knocked out as Medina's railguns fire on the ship. When they reach the vicinity of Medina, the strike team exits their pods. The Rossi moves out of range of the railguns, and Naomi checks on Clarissa, who reveals she's fixed the damage.
I didn't use my mods. Just a ratchet strap and some elbow grease. I'm gonna earn my keep.
Meanwhile, the strike team drops through space in a barrage of bullets. When they land on Medina, they take fire from the ground and air. Bobbie calls the Rossi for air support, but the ship can't help as long as the railguns are still in play. Bobbie orders everyone to fall back as she advances, becoming an assault force of 1.
All teams fall back!
She takes heavy fire, but manages to take out the railgun's control center. Just when it looks like she won't make it, Amos arrives to cover her. They're both pinned down, but the Rossi appears to provide the air support they desperately need. As the battle ends, Bobbie explains she had no choice but to disable the railguns. It was better to knock them out than enable the Free Navy to keep operating them. On the Pella, which is still speeding toward the ring, Marco gets a message from Admiral Duarte, one of the masterminds behind the rogue Martian faction that traded Martian technology for the proto-molecule sample and scientist Paolo Cortazar in the 5th season. Throughout Season 6, the beginning of each episode shows a snippet of what's happening on the ring planet Laconia, where Duarte settled. But it isn't until Episode 4 that we meet him. Duarte attends a funeral of young Kara's brother, and as he speaks to her about the loss, Cortazar informs Duarte that he has finally managed to communicate with the dormant alien spacecraft hovering above the planet. At the beginning of Babylon's Ashes, Duarte looks up at the sky smugly, seemingly indicating he's confident that he's now harnessed the protomolecule's power. As Duarte's message to Marco makes clear, that means he no longer feels he owes Marco or the Free Navy anything, including the Laconian weapons Marco requested for the battle the Free Navy is in the middle of waging. Duarte's message is a massive kiss-off, as he not only denies Marco the weapons, but also warns him to stay away from the Laconian system entirely, as Duarte tells him,
"You were a useful distraction, but I have gods to kill."
Yikes. Unfortunately, since this is the show's final episode, we won't get to see how Duarte's quest turns out. Knowing how producers think these days, it's totally possible that they'll decide to expand on the Expanse and explore this storyline further. While Marco's relationship with Laconia has been severed, he's still about to win the war against the Inners and is already making plans for when he recaptures Medina Station. Only the Rossi stands in his way. The crew tosses around ideas to stop him, even though they know they don't have enough firepower to do so. However, Naomi comes up with an idea that could end Marco permanently.
We might be able to trigger the ring entities.
Earlier in the season, Holden notices that some ships disappear without a trace as they pass through the ring. In Season 5, he tells Fred Johnson that whenever he goes through the ring, he feels angry entities lurking inside. He believes these are the aliens that created the rings and took out the civilization that made the proto-molecule. Holden thinks humanity is waking up these malevolent beings by going through the rings now. In the penultimate episode of Season 6, Holden's investigation into the ships that vanished in the rings leads him to Season 4's Dr. Okoye, who tells him that the disappearances are preceded or might be triggered by a mass energy threshold. Naomi realizes they can use this information against Marco and the Free Navy. If they can push as much mass as possible through the ring at exactly the right time, they can reach the energy threshold to trigger the ring entities. The ring entities will then lash out at Marco's ship, putting a stop to him once and for all. Naomi's plan works perfectly, and though she deeply mourns the loss of her and Marco's son Philip, whom she believes was on the Pella with his father, she and the crew of the Rossi manage to bring Marco and the Free Navy to an end. This leaves the leaders of Earth and Mars and those in the Belt who aren't loyal to Marco to negotiate a truce. Along with Avasarala and Mars's Prime Minister, Drummer represents the Belters in the talks. Holden is also at the table as the one Earther who is a friend to all sides. All parties agree they need to form a transport union to control trade to the ring colonies, but the Belters want control as they believe Earth and Mars will eventually go back to their old oppressive ways.
I will not be reasoned back into my place. Belters are promised a future, so long as it remains convenient.
None of the factions will budge, so Holden points out that if they can't find a way to trust each other now, they never will. This gives Avasarala an idea. The Transport Union could be an independent agency with Holden, someone Earth, Mars, and the Belters trust as its leader. Holden is surprised by the idea, but ultimately says he's open to it if he can have certain assurances. The scene cuts to the ceremony at Medina Station announcing the formation of the Transport Union and Holden as its president. Holden makes a speech expressing his pride in being the first head of the new organization as Avasarala and Drummer, the union's vice president, stand on either side of him. The teleprompter indicates his speech is coming to an end, and Avasarala moves to congratulate him, but Holden keeps talking. There's an audible gasp as he resigns as the leader of the Transport Union and introduces Drummer as the new president, to the joy of the Belters present.
The future of the Belt has to speak with a Belter's voice, and in that spirit, I'm proud to introduce the new president of the Transport Union, Tamina Drummer.
Drummer steps up to the podium to answer questions as Holden walks away and is confronted by a furious Avasarala. She accuses him of negotiating in bad faith and says she'll undo his actions, but he begs her not to, convinced he's done the right thing. Ultimately, Avasarala backs down and smiles as the pair shake hands. Later, Holden and the crew are back on the Rossi, where Bobbie has joined them as their new pilot. When they're alone, Holden acknowledges to Naomi that he made a lot of people angry by stepping down from the Transport Union. She reassures him he did the right thing and gives a speech about helping people and small actions making big impacts.
You followed your conscience in the hope that others would follow theirs.
As she talks, the story flashes back to the Pella before it entered the ring. Marco had just given a rousing speech to the crew's cheers, but Philip isn't enthralled like the others. His brief exposure to his mother's perspective in Season 5 opens his eyes to just how manipulative Marco can be, and throughout the 6th season, Philip becomes increasingly convinced Marco may not be doing the right thing. The last straw comes when Marco dismisses Rosenfeld's death and indicates he and Philip made a choice to be in their current situation. Of course, Philip had no choice, so as Marco distracts his minions with pretty words, Philip takes a ship and flies away from the Pella and his father. Most tellingly, when designating himself as the ship's owner, he types in the name Philip Nagata, taking Naomi's last name instead of Marco's. On the Rossi, Holden starts brainstorming their next moves, but Naomi interrupts him, asking him to take a breath before they begin a new adventure. This brings the show to a quiet end that's still bursting with possibilities. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.